3 things you will never regret bringing no matter how you are traveling. Duct tape, wet wipes, and extra water and or socks. Get the words on the page. Most great books are just as much the product of editing as they are writing, and without a lump of clay to start, there's not going to be any sculpture. So get a first draft done. That's your lump of clay. Trust the process. Consider this my confessional. Toast on the run. At first I thought the man had cerebral palsy, but then I realized it was just the DTs. And he couldn't have been over 35, although it looked like he put most of the mileage on face first. He asked me if I had bus fare, and I said no, but asked him how he'd like a drink, and he said that'd get him there even faster. So 2 by 2, I marched out of the gas station with the old King Cobra, a king fit for the skids. And we walked about a block down the line and sat cross-legged like monks while he told me the history of his life and how he fell out of favor with the gods of hard work and clean living. Used to be a mechanic, he said, but it's hard to turn a wrench with the wobblies. And it was better this way in the end. Clean living was for nice folks. But we weren't nice folk, were we? But wait now, just a minute, because we weren't necessarily bad folk either. But seeing how some folk had to bear the cross through the psychic minefield that surrounds the modern man's Golgotha, over hill and dale, past armed sentinel and toll booth operator alike, where the tall buildings grow like camouflage mountains wearing steel coveralls, across bridges made of wind that tie us to the earth like dirty shoelaces, or rivers longer than the barrel of the pistol that finally killed the god of honest work and clean living. When man came of age, in a sudden flash of brilliance, with fig leaf over his heart, pledging allegiance to something so awful as to be equally forgettable. Just another bum on the run from original sin. And what the clean living can't clean makes the cobra bite tingle in all the right places, he said, and smiled, and shook my hand as if to go, because a moving man drinks moving, and he was going to get there fast one day. And well, I finished the drink anyway by myself, because running was for the cobra inside, on the straight and narrow flume to the heart, and I was going to get there one day too. For me, writing's cheaper than therapy. Therapy would probably be better, but it's kind of a way to process the world, you know? And it's a way to feel like I'm communicating, not just with myself, but with other people. And I think that's really important because none of us are all that smart in isolation. It's really together that we kind of come up with our best ideas about the world and what kind of world we might imagine versus what kind of world we're willing to accept. It's also, to some degree, a compulsion. I kind of have to keep my sanity. So I think amongst creative peoples, you see a larger tendency or proclivity towards addiction. And I've definitely struggled in my life with various self-destructive addictions, you know, like drinking, just all kinds of things, you know, just bad behavior in general. And I'm grateful every day that the addiction that won in my life was art. And if I was to tell another person why they should write or why they should do any kind of art, it would be the idea that it's just a healthier addiction than most. They are going to package World War III as an extended infomercial. They are going to sell us a belief system in pieces, late nights when we have the softest grip on our resolve. Brian Williams sits comfortably in the window of the television, quoting Leonard Cohen before the inevitable backlash falls like 59 Tomahawk missiles. I hurt my knee, but had to work. And my boss gave me an Oxycontin, and suddenly I couldn't feel anything. And suddenly, I understood America. It's not that we need convenient answers, we just need our answers to be more coherent than the truth. For Cohen, truth happened naked. Weapons were like the birthmark on your ass. War was like the moments before sleep, where your eyelashes flicker like fire from the wounds of your eyes. Bombed out craters, apoplectic plaster and piles of rubble. How we managed to be at peace, even while missiles swan dive in far-off lands. As the pundits reiterate their belief in poetry, try to convince us that art can wipe the slate clean where geopolitics failed. Well, you definitely have to live something. So, I know a lot of young writers get the advice to at least write what you know. And I think it's better to start with what's happening to you every day. You're gonna have more authority on those subjects. You don't have to. Obviously, people don't. I don't know if anybody's living the Avengers movies, but they're still managing to write them. So I just think, especially in what they're calling the fine arts, it's about the human experience, and that's specific to each and every one of us. And we should definitely try to capture what's specific to us first before we try to generalize. The centerpiece of my living room is a piano I cannot play. Through the back window, one can count the streetlights in the parking lot of the fast food restaurant behind our house. One can hear the cars traveling Charleston at 45 miles an hour to get back to families they resent from the miserable jobs they depend on. People around here don't go to posh artisanal rehab centers. They die in that parking lot. They walk into the light flickering right overhead, only to hear the broken voice cackle out of the speaker. Are you still there? Is that all you're ordering? How about a hot apple pie? Hello? Are you still there? Were we ever there in the first place? Were we ever more than a collection of receipts for meals we won't remember tomorrow, crumpled up into the ashtrays of cars that won't run in 5 years? We couldn't buy salvation at the window. We never learned to play that piano either. But worst of all, when we noticed another passing in the night, we saw ourselves as strangers, as pilgrims, only linked by faith. Bring an atlas and turn the phone off every once in a while. Overstimulation is fine for commerce, but long drives lend themselves to a bit of silence, and it'll help using an atlas with your spatial reasoning some. Google Maps ain't helping with that, so. Don't write to get laid or make money or be popular or have influence over strangers. They're all accomplished much easier with a guitar. I really believe that it's like when I was in high school, they made me read As I Lay Dying, and there must have been like a real world marathon or something going on, and so I didn't do the reading, and then I had to go into class, and it was embarrassing to not know what everybody was talking about. And I don't know, I think William Faulkner's a fine writer, but I also live in a universe where the real world marathon can be just as important. And plus, him and his wife slept in different beds, which I just find kind of weird. Stephen Crane already knew, for C.J. Shaw. How do you explain war to someone who's never been in one? It's not being around so much brutality that does it. It happens later, Because the problem with conflict is it inevitably ends, but not before it alters us to fit in its grip. I knew some vets up in Humboldt who would never trust a human being again. They had seen our nature, so they could predict our future, and that destiny did not look optimistic through any shade of the looking glass. I'm not afraid of the FBI. I'm not afraid of prison. I am afraid of what I am capable of. Our history is like a path so precarious that one can't turn around, even after a misplaced step. Because of this, the future is guaranteed, the same way we'd get a loan. We give collateral first, perhaps even our idealism. There were plenty of casual days when the gunshots wouldn't even break my concentration. It's not that death seems so impossible, it just seems so impossibly meaningless. Like a joke that goes on for long enough that the punchline doesn't even make sense anymore. I want so desperately to live in a society without violence. But the catch is, I think I'd be willing to die for it. Try driving the speed limit for a change. When you spend all day counting the miles, you miss the point of traveling. So, crack the windows, grab a couple sunflower seeds, spit them on the ground, enjoy yourself. Ask at least one friend for a second opinion before you start playing doctor on yourself. I know health insurance is expensive these days, and it's one of the things you often lose out on when you're traveling, but just check before you do anything irreversible. Normally I stick with Lucy. You can cut it with booze, and it never quite sneaks up on you the way this, shit. Tom, where'd you go? But my Israeli friend had left me hours ago. As for the storm, the rain played a 2-count march on the skin of the greenhouse under which I lay listening to the ruckus in relative protection, although already soaked from earlier. No paparazzi flashes of lightning to mark the passage of 1 minute into the next, but just the dull drilling of rain, like just endless rain coming down until the earth was completely saturated. In the distance sits a cabin I built in a half delirium of stress and desperation. We'd been living in a shed, but unfortunately, so were the mice. When I close my eyes, I see armies of rats on pilgrimage to Rat Mecca, and for once it's not an invasion, but a homecoming. Rats so thick it's like television static or packing popcorn. Rats so saturated they spill through every eroded opportunity towards a singular and unidentifiable purpose with all the force of some physical law, immutable, substantiated by their own sheer volume. The whole history of humanity hanging over our head like a fresco of clouds going gray with dropsy, threatening rain and that we might remember where we came from, perhaps on one fine bluster-filled evening of cacophony after my friend Tom leaves us to sort it out on our own. It should have been acid, I lament to the howling of water across the woven polyurethane. It should have been better, closer to art, farther from suffering. It should have rained so hard in the cosmic winds of our first instant that nothing was left for the rats to grow fat on. Plan for the worst case scenario, but be prepared for the best. If you are driving through a place where it might snow, bring chains. But don't start panicking before you're standing out in the middle of the blizzard putting them on. Give freely and you'll be more likely to taken care of. The right kind of attitude's always going to bring the right kind of people, whether it's your friends or your audience. Mechanical problems, maybe rainstorms, bad relationships, good relationships, dinners, a lot of potlucks. Those are usually a nice way to find a community. Really big ideas come out of small happenings, small events. And so I think that what's going on with the poet is just an attempt to use those small events to break through into something bigger. I don't know, I just can't really believe that what happens with artists is so much more profound than just what happens with anybody, you know? They got Dillinger in an alley outside the Biograph. A whore ratted him out, and it was alleged that Charles Winstead put the fatal bullet in the back of his head. Later, Winstead was a stoolie for the Los Alamos bomb builders, but that never made the picture shows. They had to try Jack McCall twice to nail him for offing Hickok. To this day, they can't figure out what that last card was, but I like to think it would have paid out. Key and S were the words that made Garrett famous. While poor Billy was just looking for a piece of ass, that's why they called him the Kid. Cigar-smoking Bonnie Parker put in a poem before it happened, and it took 130 rounds to finally drag the Giants down. Legend has it they couldn't be buried together because no cemetery was big enough to hold the both of them. Murder is a matter for the newspapermen to debate. Fame is the open sore inside the dime store novel. Some find death like a wedding ring that fell into the sink. Others climb it without effort, like true heroes. That great, inevitable escalator to nowhere. If you can't enjoy it alone, it won't be better with company. I think that's probably as much writing advice as it is life advice. I think what I want the most is more opportunities. It seems nowadays that there's two ways to make a living writing. One is that you be a teacher, and the other is that you turn it into a commercial adventure. You become an Instagram poet or something, and there's nothing wrong with either of those paths. But somewhere in the middle, maybe there's something that allows people to live a more normal life. I think artists tend to be creative, and they tend to find creative ways to deal with the problem of having to make a living. But often making a living is a full-time job, and art becomes the thing that you have to do on the side. And I just don't think that's healthy for us as a society. We can find ways to subsidize oil companies. We can find ways to subsidize big agriculture poisoning our food, but we can't find simple ways to subsidize people who are just looking for answers to give our lives meaning. Maybe a better answer would be, what I want from my community is a 20-hour work week. I mean, work's healthy, but it leaves everybody the space to have the time to reflect, because at the end of our lives, no one's checking their bank account statement to try to measure what it all meant. You can leave anything out as long as you know you're leaving it out. So trust your audience to have a functioning imagination. Never could explain what it is I hated so much about the suburbs. If the ship always sinks, why keep bailing water when we can just build a better ship? And each year the cruise takes less people anyway, puts them in bigger cabins. But then when they hit an iceberg, we send in the whole Navy to save them. It's easy to forget who you are when you don't have neighbors. Mine are always either crazy or shrewd. One just got in a fight with a homeless guy in the alley this last week, and the other told him not to bother. The homeless have so much less to lose. and knives are cheap, and being stabbed is expensive. Success is a form of fear. The Buddhists call it samsara, and they prescribe meditation. But I've always believed as long as you live in the ghetto, it's impossible to forget that civil society is an illusion. Diogenes of Sinope just lived in a tub. According to legend, he destroyed his only possession, a wooden bowl, after watching a boy drink from his hands. He would walk around with a lamp searching for an honest man, but then he died from holding his breath. Or was it a dog bite? He always loved dogs. To him, they behaved more nobly than men. I never thought living was noble in any format. It's just the thing to do, though even cynics get serious about it in their own way. One day, I suppose, we'll all run out of things to do. How many books can a man write with a clean conscience anyway, once he realizes all his final possessions are words? Then perhaps we move back to the suburbs. I'll build us a bookshelf to hold all the philosophies that never worked, except to keep the printers in business. Since if the flood ever comes, all we'll really need is a tub to absolve us or carry us away to something better. But then, most dogs are natural-born swimmers. Work something that lasts longer than you'd like it to.
It was one of those afternoons you could shoot off a fence post like a beer can. It felt good to be alive, like it feels good to be full of shit sometimes. All the tough questions in life were being investigated by meteorologists and political consultants, part-time clairvoyants, guys who had their own fishing show. The wind was as still as a paperweight, while I was sitting with a buddy in a wild corner of eternity waiting for sunburn or war to break the silence. We were thinking about how sometimes knowledge is something as simple as a warm beer, or experience another man's sweetheart that you're trying to take home. We were gossiping about God with the rocks, who were all proven atheists. My buddy turned to me and said, living can be a job, just like anything else. And I thought about some of the jobs I've worked. Jobs with numbers, jobs with people, jobs with mops, brooms, sponges, a clean pine scent. Jobs with sun and sky and hammer and power tool. Also jobs more stale. Air conditioner jobs, fluorescent light bulb jobs, jobs that are done from desks and cash registers and brown leather chairs, the kind you must condition. Some jobs I'd quit, some had quit me. Some had burned and some had broke, and some others just fizzled out like wet firecrackers. Dumb fucking jobs, but also jobs a man would kill for. Take the job of living. It kind of made sense when you thought about it. Then came quitting time, and it didn't matter what you thought about it.
I like doing something that I can set down at the end of the day. Working all day with the shovel might be hard on the back and, the lungs, like, it can be a rough job, but at the end of the day, you set that shovel down and there goes your job. You don't carry it home with you. There's no meeting. There's no email with Rob over in Human Resources. Like, you just do what you got to do for the day and then you leave it behind. So it's not for everybody, but it's part of the reason why I can live in this van, throw my tools in the back. I can leave tomorrow. If I end up at a really bad job where I'm not happy, I can tell them to go F themselves any day of the week and move on. There's always need for someone who knows how to swing a hammer. And less people are doing it today than used to. It's probably less competitive than being a brand manager or something. So I enjoy it. Less is more, always. If you can do it with one adjective, don't do it with two. If you can do it with one metaphor, don't do it with two. If you can do it with one detail, don't do it with two. They have to share the weight. So allow them to stand tall and just use the right one. When I remember my grandfather, it's not the claw machine toys or urine hissing against snow outside the sauna. It's not the scent of ruppelmints and peppermint schnapps steeping in the voice of failure and aggravation, drunk as a hurricane, telling me my birthright was to be the same loser he was, and who was my father to think he was better than anyone, that son of a bitch. It's not that last geyser of rage, right before belligerence fades to nonsense, when he'd finally pass out so I could finish my homework. It's the smell of spackle drying, more clinical even than paint, or the sudden detonation of cigarette plume against rolled up window in his faded maroon jalopy, halfway to the casino. The details that remain most precise aren't quite neutral as much as they are atmospheric. Weather changes with the season. He was so afraid towards the end because he had run out of every other reflex. All the hate dried clear. But in the mirror of his terror, I saw the same little boy that used to cower from his rebukes, waiting for some rain to strip us clean again, to define the distance between now and heaven, that we might have half a chance of surviving the journey. Be sincere. When people know who you really are, they are more prepared to give you what you really need. You might get taken advantage of every once in a while, but you get taken advantage of for who you are and not who you're pretending to be, and I just think that's a little easier to stomach. Goes hand in hand with that, be vulnerable. Someone always has to do it first, you know? No good love stories ever started without someone putting it on the line. No adventure without someone accepting the risk. No great work of art without people opening themselves up for others to kind of walk through their private moments. You just have to, and it sucks, but you have to. Be kind as a first resort, to yourself, to others, to your critics, and the telemarketer whose call you accidentally answered. We have our whole lives to get mad about shit that doesn't matter, but we also have our whole lives to practice the patience that makes it matter less. Poetry is just an attempt to see the world in a way it hasn't been seen yet. Poetry is supposed to be subversive. You know, it's like stealing meaning from everyday events. It's like shoplifting spirituality out of boredom. I don't know. I think there's a whole industry designed around making it seem like it's impossible or inaccessible, but I think it's the most normal and present part of our life, because everybody feels that connection they can't explain sometimes, that this is bigger, this moment is bigger than what I'm living in right now. Like, this moment connects me to something much larger, whether you can articulate it or not. So always use a clean bathroom when you have a chance. Always. You never know when you're gonna find another one, and you don't want to be trapped when it's time to go. So just take advantage of it, sit down, get comfortable, and make something happen.
In Cambodia,
I ate fermented duck eggs, hard-boiled, tarantula fried in oil, crickets roasted in the open air over a fire in a metal basket. There was a beach with no one there but myself, plus this woman who meant everything. And years later, I think back on what it looked like as she walked around a corner to find some private place to pee. The sun was hanging heavy in the sky like it had been driving all night to get to where we were, and the water shimmered in a mineral way as the bushes of the jungle engulfed her in deep green flames. I guess she was worried what I'd think if I saw her doing that, so she hid it from me, perhaps understanding how knowledge tends to deliver itself with diminishing returns. It didn't work though. In the end, I saw so much more. I never thought any less of her, for the record, even as she tiptoed away from me through the rustled foliage, off towards some secret shame or some private joy. Just watched it happen in awe. The longer you are without a home, the more you feel that you don't belong anywhere, but also that you don't belong to anywhere. So take that for what it is. And when all else fails, pull over, pull the curtains, and just try again tomorrow. Know when to put down the pen. Know when a parking lot's gonna be the best campsite you're gonna find. And don't keep pushing it when all the stars are aligned against you. Well, that really depends on if you can get someone to pay you for it. If you can get money for it, I guess it counts as work. Work is managing an Instagram account, trying to figure out how many posts you need to beat an algorithm, I hope poetry's not work. I hope everything doesn't have to be work. Just because you're working at it doesn't make it a job, Man, aren't you curious where we're going? Like, you're just gonna let me walk you out in the desert? There's like trash all over the place. Looks like people get killed out here. Marco, man. Marco, ask me where we're going.
Where are we going?
We're going to see a friend of mine. He's an artist too. He kind of just takes all the things people don't like and finds new homes for them, All the stuff people don't have use for. Kind of what I feel like I do in my own way. Graveyard shift. The cicadas sound like a death ray in a B movie. The air is thick, heavier than my wool blankets. I drank all the scotch one friend left behind after I found out another friend was leaving. I've never needed much, and yet we find out fast what we still manage to take for granted. I'd like to call you. In my dreams, you never speak. Just smile impatiently, like a man with a secret he can't tell quite yet. If you found peace, old friend, just point, and I'll start walking that way. It's 3:47 a.m., and I've got nothing but time before the morning comes to call this shift to a close. But if you can't tell me yet, just say anything else. I miss your voice. I miss all of it. And I'm not picky or proud or sure of much, except the cicadas are a racket. These sheets are a revelation. So don't make me settle for nightmares to keep this friendship alive. If you found peace, just blink twice. I won't hold you hostage any longer. If you found peace, teach it how to haunt me as well as you do. 4:09 a.m. plenty of time still to wait. I'll be here all night, waiting, but I'm not sure what for. If you found peace, don't tell me. I'm not ready. Just keep smiling when I see you, and I'll figure it out when it's my turn to punch that ticket.